What happens when gods reveal their monsters? Here's the chilling truth nobody discusses. Some NBA players have committed acts so dark that if you knew the full story, you'd never cheer the same way again. What twisted psychology drives someone children worship to destroy lives, including their own? But here's what'll make your blood freeze. How many secrets are still buried? How many victims silenced by settlement checks and NDAS? What if the cases we know are just the tip of a nightmare iceberg? The NBA, that glittering temple of hero worship, has become an unwitting laboratory for what happens when you give unlimited power to fundamentally broken people. What kind of darkness festers when someone realizes they can literally get away with anything? Here's the most terrifying question. What monsters are still wearing jerseys, playing in packed arenas while their darkest secrets remain buried 6 feet deep? Are you ready to discover how deep this rabbit hole of corruption, cover-ups, and unthinkable crimes really goes? Because what you're about to learn will shatter everything. J.R. Smith, the bad boy with the bad car choices. J.R. Smith was chaos personified. On the court, he was the human heat check, the guy who could miss 10 shots in a row and still take the 11th, like it was destiny. But off the court, the chaos only got louder. Long before he became a meme in the 2018 NBA Finals for dribbling out the clock like it was a casual pickup game, J.R. had built himself a reputation, not for basketball IQ, but for terrible car decisions. Arrested for reckless driving, slapped with a DUI, fined for drag racing through New Jersey streets, and in 2007, tragedy struck. JR caused a car accident that killed his friend, Andre Bell. He was charged with vehicular manslaughter and spent 24 days in jail. JR's driving record was so infamous it felt like he was trying to speedrun the DMV's entire penalty handbook. If Uber ever saw his application, the app wouldn't just reject him, it would probably self-destruct. And yet, somehow, amid all the fines, suspensions, and bad press, J.R. Smith found himself next to LeBron James, wearing a Cavaliers jersey. Maybe LeBron saw something in him, or maybe he figured, if I can survive JR in crunch time, I can survive anything. Because that was JR in a nutshell, a walking contradiction. The same guy who could hit 8 threes in a playoff game could also forget the score with the championship on the line. He lived on the edge, on the road, on the court, and in life. And that edge is exactly what made him unforgettable. But if you thought J.R. Smith behind the wheel was scary, wait until you hear about a guy who thought fighting his coach was a good career move. Latrell Sprewell, the choker. Latrell Sprewell wasn't just another NBA player. He was a 4-time All-Star, one of the league's most athletic, fiery guards of the 1990s, and also the man whose name became synonymous with one of the most infamous meltdowns in sports history. December 1997. Practice with the Golden State Warriors. Tensions ran high between Sprewell and head coach P.J. Carlesimo, who had a reputation for being tough and demanding. Words escalated. Carlesimo told Sprewell to put a little mustard on his passes. Sprewell didn't take it as constructive criticism. He took it as an insult. Moments later, in an eruption no one saw coming, Sprewell closed the distance and literally put his hands around his coach's throat. Yes, not metaphorically, not he choked under pressure. He actually choked his coach. Players and staff pulled him away, but Sprewell wasn't done. After leaving the gym to cool down, he returned and tried to attack Carlesimo again. The punishment was historic, a 68-game suspension, the longest in NBA history at that time. Many assumed his career was finished, but this is where the story takes another turn. Sprewell came back, revived his career, made the finals with the Knicks in 1999, and rebranded himself as a clutch playoff performer. And then, in peak Sprewell fashion, he made headlines again in 2004 when he turned down a 3-year, $21 million contract from the Timberwolves. His reason? I've got a family to feed. It became one of the most meme-worthy quotes in NBA history, because unless his family was exclusively dining on yachts and Fabergé eggs, $21 million should have covered the groceries. Latrell Sprewell's legacy isn't just about his talent. It's about how one man's temper, one man's pride, and one man's refusal to ever play by the rules turned him into a walking cautionary tale. A brilliant player who will forever be remembered as the guy who choked his coach. Now, Sprewell might have attacked his coach, but at least he didn't go full Hollywood villain like the next guy. Javaris Crittenton, from hardwood to hard time. Javaris Crittenton was supposed to be a name you heard on draft night, not in a courtroom. A first-round pick in 2007, he entered the NBA with promise, a 6'5" guard with athleticism, defense, and potential. But if you remember Crittenton at all, it's not for anything he did on the court, it's for what came next. His NBA career was short, bouncing from the Lakers to the Grizzlies to the Wizards, and it was in Washington, D.C., where the legend of Javaris Crittenton took its infamous turn. December 2009, the Wizards' locker room. A gambling dispute between Crittenton and teammate Gilbert Arenas escalated from trash talk to full-on Wild West Ghost cosplay. Guns were brought into the locker room. Yes, guns. Arenas laid out 4 pistols by Crittenton's locker as a twisted joke. Crittenton, not laughing, allegedly pointed one back. It was the kind of story that made the NBA look less like a professional league and more like a badly written crime drama. That incident alone practically ended Crittenton's NBA career. But his fall didn't stop there. In 2011, just 2 years removed from the arena's fiasco, Crittenton was arrested and later convicted for his role in a drive-by shooting in Atlanta that killed a 22-year-old mother of 4, Julian Jones. He claimed he was targeting someone else, but intent didn't matter. A life was lost, and so was his freedom. In 2015, Javaris Crittenton was sentenced to 23 years in prison, from first-round pick to inmate in less than a decade. Crittenton is one of the darkest examples of wasted potential in basketball history. His stat line in the NBA is forgettable. His legacy, tragically, is unforgettable. But speaking of wasted potential, let's talk about a big man whose career went sideways faster than his defensive slides. Shawn Kemp, the Rain Man, Rain's trouble. In the 1990s, Shawn Kemp was electric. Known as the Rain Man, he turned Seattle into a highlight reel, soaring through the air with dunks so violent they felt like personal insults to the rim. He was a 6-time All-Star, a key part of the Supersonics finals run in 1996, and one of the most exciting players of his era. On the court, Kemp defied gravity. Off the court, gravity, and just about everything else, seemed to catch up to him. By the 2000s, Kemp's life had become a cautionary tale. Weight issues, substance abuse rumors, and a career that fizzled far earlier than it should have. In 2005, his struggles became official when he was arrested for drug possession in Washington. It was the kind of headline no fan ever wanted to see, but unfortunately it wasn't the last. Fast forward to 2023 and the Rain Man made the news again, this time for something straight out of a crime drama. Kemp was arrested in Tacoma after being involved in what police described as a drive-by shooting. Yes, the high-flying dunker of the 90s was suddenly trending on Twitter as the alleged gunman in a modern shootout. He claimed it was self-defense and ultimately no charges were filed, but the shock stuck. Shawn Kemp went from raining dunks on NBA opponents to raining chaos in his post-basketball life. Thankfully, he avoided serious prison time, but his legacy now carries a shadow. The Rain Man will always be remembered for posterizing defenders, but his post-NBA story is just as famous for reminding us how quickly the fall from glory can be. Kemp may have had issues off the court, but at least he didn't gamble his whole reputation away. Unlike our next guy, Antoine Walker, the gambling machine. Antoine Walker had it all: a smooth jumper, 3 All-Star selections, an NBA championship ring, and a signature shimmy that made him one of the most entertaining players of the early 2000s. Over the course of his career, he earned more than $108 million in salary alone. Add endorsements and appearances, and you'd think Walker was set for life. But if Antoine Walker's story proves anything, it's this: making money is one thing, keeping it is another. By the time his NBA career was over, Walker had blown through nearly every cent. Gambling debts piled up, investments went sideways, friends and family siphoned off his fortune. In 2009, he was arrested in Las Vegas for writing nearly $1 million worth of bad checks to cover casino losses. The 3-time All-Star had become the poster child for how not to handle your money. Walker later admitted that he trusted the wrong people, spent recklessly, and lived a lifestyle that only worked if NBA paychecks kept rolling in. Once they stopped, reality hit hard. At one point, he even filed for bankruptcy, a stunning fall for someone who once strutted across the final stage with a championship trophy in his hands. Imagine making over $100 million and still ending up broke. That's Antoine Walker, a man who turned Allen Iverson into Warren Buffett by comparison. His story isn't just about gambling, it's about how fast the game can take away everything if you don't respect what you've earned. And speaking of bad decisions with money, let's roll into a guy who thought fraud was just another hustle. The NBA Health Insurance Fraud Squad, featuring Big Baby Davis. In 2021, the NBA wasn't rocked by a dunk, a buzzer beater, or a blockbuster trade. It was rocked by a scam. About 18 former players, including Glenn Big Baby Davis, Tony Allen, and Sebastian Telfair, were indicted for defrauding the league's health and welfare benefit plan. The scheme was almost cartoonishly sloppy. Players submitted fake invoices for dental work, root canals, chiropractic visits, even braces. Some claimed to be getting procedures in cities where they weren't even present. Others sent in nearly identical paperwork, as if the league's investigators couldn't spot a copy-paste job. At one point, Terrence Williams, the alleged ringleader, was caught coaching players on how to file these fake claims, while also skimming kickbacks from the money they received. The most embarrassing part? They were scamming the same league that had their entire medical history on file. The NBA literally knew what surgeries they had, what doctors they'd seen, and when. It was like trying to call in sick to work while live streaming your beach vacation on Instagram. By the time the dust settled, the FBI had stepped in, charges were filed, and careers that were already over got stamped with one final disgrace. The health insurance fraud squad turned what could have been quiet retirements into cautionary tales of greed and stupidity. Big Baby Davis once held an NBA championship trophy. Now his most famous photo is of him holding a takeout box in a hotel room, denying the charges while eating Popeye's chicken. If that's not a career arc, I don't know what is. But as ridiculous as health insurance fraud sounds, it's still somehow less embarrassing than getting arrested with a car full of drugs. Zach Randolph, from grit and grind to grit and gram. Zach Randolph, better known as Zebo, was the heart and soul of the Memphis Grizzlies' grit and grind era. A throwback bruiser with soft hands and a mean streak, he helped transform a small market team into a playoff nightmare for a decade. Randolph was beloved in Memphis, not just for his buckets and rebounds, but for embodying the city's blue-collar fight. But in 2017, a headline dropped that didn't sound like the Zebo fans knew. Randolph was arrested in Los Angeles after police found 2 pounds of marijuana in his possession, packaged in a way authorities described as intent to distribute. Translation? They thought the Grizzlies legend was moonlighting as a weed dealer. The internet had a field day. Here was a man who made over $200 million in career earnings, being accused of hustling like he needed gas money. Fans joked that Zebo went from power forward to drug lord overnight. The memes practically wrote themselves. Why compete with dispensaries when you could be running a barbecue joint in Memphis for life? To be fair, Randolph's lawyer insisted the weed was strictly personal use, and eventually the charges were reduced. But the stain of that arrest lingers in his story. Zebo went from grit and grind to grit and gram, proving that even multimillionaires aren't immune to headlines that make them look like neighborhood hustlers. It didn't erase his Memphis legacy, but it reminded everyone. Sometimes off-court decisions can be more baffling than anything that happens in the paint. But while Zebo just got high, our next guy got violent. Gilbert Arenas, Agent Zero, Agent Chaos. We can't talk NBA crimes without mentioning Gilbert Arenas, the man who decided that the best way to settle a locker room dispute was by turning it into a live-action version of Grand Theft Auto. In December 2009, Arenas brought multiple guns into the Washington Wizards locker room after a gambling argument with teammate Javaris Crittenton. And not just one gun. He laid out 4 pistols by Crittenton's locker, like it was a video game loadout screen, daring him to pick one. Crittenton, instead of laughing, allegedly pulled his own gun. Suddenly, the Wizards weren't a basketball team. They were an armed standoff waiting to happen. Thankfully, no shots were fired, but the damage was instant. News of the incident exploded. The Wizards' season collapsed under the weight of the scandal. Arenas, once one of the NBA's brightest stars and a fan favorite, known for clutch scoring and outrageous confidence, became a walking punchline. The league suspended him for the rest of the season. Sponsors dropped him, and his reputation never recovered. This was a man who had averaged nearly 30 points per game just a few years earlier, who had the whole city of DC buzzing, suddenly reduced to tabloid fodder. Overnight, Agent Zero didn't just refer to his jersey number. It became shorthand for the number of brain cells used in that infamous decision. Arenas would eventually bounce around the league, but he never regained his star status. The gun scandal defined him, overshadowing his talent and turning him into the cautionary tale for what happens when ego, gambling, and poor judgment collide. Gilbert Arenas wanted to be remembered as a fearless scorer. Instead, history remembers him as the guy who brought the gun show to the locker room. Arenas brought guns to the locker room, but our next guy took violence to a whole other level, like full-blown international incident level. Delonte West, The Roller Coaster Life. Delonte West's story might be the saddest cautionary tale the NBA has ever produced. At his peak, he was a fiery guard with real talent, a key contributor alongside LeBron James on the Cleveland Cavaliers and later with the Dallas Mavericks. He had toughness, playmaking, and the kind of scrappy energy that made him a fan favorite. But behind the hardwood highlights, West was battling demons few people saw. Diagnosed with bipolar disorder, West struggled with his mental health throughout his career. Combine that with substance abuse issues and a series of arrests, from weapons charges to disorderly conduct, and his promising NBA path slowly unraveled. Instead of climbing into veteran leadership roles, he slipped out of the league entirely. The most heartbreaking part? Years later, fans spotted him homeless, wandering the streets looking like a ghost of the man who once wore an NBA jersey. Viral photos showed him begging for help at highway intersections, his downfall laid bare for the world to see. Mark Cuban, owner of the Mavericks, personally stepped in, picking West up from a gas station and helping get him into rehab. For a moment, it seemed like a lifeline, but recovery is not a straight line. and West's story continues to be a fragile, painful reminder. Delonte West shows us that NBA money and fame don't guarantee stability. Sometimes the biggest battles aren't fought under bright lights, but in the shadows, where talent can't protect you and only real support can. His life is more than just another NBA crime story. It's a human tragedy. And that brings us to the king of NBA crime stories, a man whose fall from grace was so dramatic, it feels straight out of a Netflix documentary. Allen Iverson, from jail to MVP. Allen Iverson's story almost ended before it ever began, long before The Answer crossed up Michael Jordan or delivered the most iconic practice rant in NBA history. He was sitting in a jail cell at just 17 years old. In 1993, Iverson was involved in a brawl at a Virginia bowling alley. Chairs were thrown, chaos erupted, and Iverson, already a local high school sports legend in both basketball and football, was arrested along with several friends. Despite shaky evidence and conflicting witness accounts, he was convicted of maiming by mob and sentenced to 15 years in prison. For a teenager, it looked like game over. But then, something remarkable happened. After serving 4 months, Iverson's conviction was overturned due to lack of evidence and public outcry over what many believed was a racially biased case. He was released, given a second chance, and Georgetown coach John Thompson took a chance on him, shielding him from the streets, giving him structure, and unleashing his raw talent on the NCAA. The rest is history. Iverson went from almost being a forgotten cautionary tale to becoming an NBA MVP, 11-time All-Star, and cultural icon. His braids, tattoos, and fearless swagger rewrote the league's fashion and attitude. He didn't just play basketball, he changed it. AI's story is wild because it's a razor-thin line between two realities. One where Iverson becomes another wasted talent, lost to the system, and the one we know, where he becomes a legend. From jail to MVP, Allen Iverson didn't just flip the script, he became the script. So, what did we learn today? That NBA players are just like us, except taller, richer, and occasionally much worse at obeying the law. Some bounced back, some spiraled, and some are probably still Googling how to expunge criminal record. But hey, next time someone tells you the NBA is boring, just remind them, the drama doesn't stop at the buzzer. If you like NBA and their stories, watch our next Weird Stories.